Floods pose a widespread threat to people and communities in Colorado and across the U.S. Most communities are situated along streams and rivers or lakes, and that means they're subject to flooding at least occasionally. So flood risk refers to the combination of the likelihood of a flood event, how often it happens, and the consequences of a flood event, the damages that it causes for a community. My background is in geography, forestry, and climate science. And so I work with people who manage public resources and infrastructure, things like dams and water supplies, to help them better understand how weather and climate pose risks to those resources and infrastructure. And in Colorado, flooding is one of the largest risks related to weather and climate. So the 1976 Big Thompson Flood was caused by a single massive thunderstorm that stayed right over the upper Big Thompson River watershed for several hours and dropped over a foot of rain in a short amount of time. And so that created a flash flood, a wall of water and debris 20 feet high that pretty much scoured down the canyon all the way to Loveland, and over 140 people died. The 2013 Front Range floods were caused by a much larger storm system that played out over several days. About 5 days of rain up and down the Front Range from Fort Collins to Colorado Springs. The rains were much less intense in 2013 than in 1976, but because they went on for days, you ended up with large amounts, over a foot, again, of rain in some areas. So a key factor affecting floods and flood risk is the weather and climate of a particular area. How often do intense rains occur? How large can the largest rain events get? And then we call the lay of the land is also important. Steeper slopes lead to faster runoff and more flooding from the same rain event. So humans affect floods in several ways. We build roads and parking lots and houses and other buildings with roofs, and this all reduces the ability of the watershed, of the soils, to absorb rainfall. More runs off and can contribute to flooding faster. So let's say what a 100-year flood is not. It is not a flood that occurs every 100 years like clockwork. It's the size of a flood event for a given area that has a 1% chance of occurring every year. And so that means over a very long time, the time between floods of this size will average out to about 100 years. But you could see two 100-year floods within a decade. In a flood event, it's really important to check the radio, the TV, or the internet, weather.gov, for warnings and instructions from the National Weather Service and other trusted sources. If you're in a floodplain or other vulnerable low-lying area and it's still safe to evacuate, you need to get out. If you're not in a vulnerable area, then you need to stay put. Don't get on the road. A car is one of the worst places to be during a flood. And if you're in a canyon, whether you're in a car or on foot or in your house, and water rises, climb up to safety. Don't try to escape down canyon. So because of the changing climate, scientists expect that the overall flood risk in Colorado and across the US will get higher in the future. Because again, warmer air and a warming climate can hold more moisture. And so any given storm event is likely to drop a little more rain than it would have without climate change. But the flood risk is so dependent also on decisions that are made by people within our communities, where we choose to build our houses and roads and other infrastructure, how we manage the watershed that's upstream of the community. So even though the changing climate is going to, in general, worsen the risk of flooding, there's still a lot we can do on the ground within communities to reduce that risk in the future.